morning, everyone. I'm gonna call finance to order. It's about 9:37. Dave, you're gonna call your meeting?
Governance to order. First item on the agenda is we need to accept the minutes from August 25th, 2020. Can I have a motion to accept those, please? Motion by Lester. Do I have a second? Don Ward. Any omissions, corrections? All in favor?
Ward's not on,
Ward's not on, we need,
He's on pictures there anyway.
no, he's not on governance. There's half seconds. All in favor? Carried. Opposed? Okay. The first item of business is consider 2020 department budget request. First on the board is legislative board and clerk of the board.
Okay, the legislative board is basically flat. The 2.5% increase on personnel. The other items remain basically the same. I did not include any funding for conferences. There was none attended last year. I didn't bring that amount over. And I might have reduced the mileage a little, considering there's more meetings on Zoom.
Any questions on any of that?
I have a question, Ron.
Go ahead, Dana.
Now breaking up my calendar, so Debbie refers to the 2021 department request is 2.5% over the 2020 adopted budget. That's the column that we compare to.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments? Moving on to, clerk of the board.
Clerk of the board, the personnel is just 2.5, and I believe there's one longevity increase in there also. The other items remain basically flat. We're now being charged per copy page on the copier, so I lowered that a little. Otherwise, we had a monthly fee on our prior copier. I raised up the advertising expense just a little because if I have to include Zoom information, I'll make them a little bit longer. The only other question is I kept the transcription the same. We're waiting to see what the transcription from Zoom will produce. But we're going to be over budget in 2020 with the transcription services. We've already had 12 board meetings this year. We've already had 12 board meetings transcribed for June. So that's why the expense is up. We had special meetings. We had more meetings during the shutdown. So there's been more board meetings increasing transcription. We do not have the license yet for Zoom to show me what that's going to look like and how that's going to change operations.
Okay.
Any questions? Dana?
Contract is
I take the very first line, regular earnings, and apply 2.5% increase in that as it works.
Right, said there's longevity in there also, one longevity.
But she has less, not more.
So,
there's a part-time.
yeah, so you'll see the line underneath it, the 121.ET, some of it goes in that.
No, I'm talking about the very first line, regular earnings,
Yep.
which is $372,000. And compared to the 2020 adopted budget, $364,000.
Oh, you're on the legislative
I
board.
just haven't go to the very first thing.
Oh, you're on the,
When she started the conversation, I asked, so the line of the 2020 adopted budget, 2.5% increase. But the math doesn't, the very first line I calculated out anyway.
what did it come to?
$373,100. So the difference,
It's just a rounding,
Is he looking at the total?
he's just looking at the total, but he's on the, back on the legislative board.
Oh,
But I think that's probably just rounding, isn't it? Cause it's very close,
Well, that's just on the regular earnings.
cause the salaries are done ahead of time anyway.
Legislative board is always
it should be
regular earnings.
Did we have the extra period in last year?
a little bit over
Did we have
the,
an extra?
it's a little bit over, right?
no, your number is a little bit under.
Goes to 2.2%.
2.2, I thought I heard 2.5.
We did, but we got corrected.
That,
Oh, it is 2.2?
thank you, Al. Is that what it's supposed to be, 2.2? I mean, I hate to throw everything in turmoil, the very first
No.
line of the budget.
I'm glad you're back. Somebody's paying attention, I'm happy.
I mean, if you take on the very first line of this handout, legislative board, regular earnings, $364,000. Multiply that by 2.5, comes out to $373,000. But you say, what's supposed to be applied, 2.2 or 2.5?
That's what we're getting at right now.
My computer would work, we would have the answer.
There you go.
Al's got his hand up.
Go ahead, Al.
Albert?
I don't have mine in front of me, but I'm assuming that Chris is looking for his exempt salary schedule, so did you change any of the salaries for the chairman or vice chairman or budget officer differently than everybody else?
I didn't think so.
Don't believe so, no.
Okay. Because basically that department is all exempt, so.
Al, what about, the weeks? Was last year, did we have an extra week? And so this year we're back to the normal? Would that change it?
Still wouldn't matter because they were.
No, because they're exempt. Wouldn't change it.
Yep.
Is 2.5 the number across board that we're gonna use?
I was assuming that until we found out it was 2.2.
Well, I mean, Brian, you're the budget officer.
Nobody,
The horse out, if you don't know what it is, nobody knows.
no, but to Brian's point, I think there might have been 262 days this year. And there's back,
Was next day this year.
That's what I'm saying. But that might have changed it, but
But why would that impact the exempt salaries?
because you still have to do it as a per diem rate, Dave. So if you went from 262 days to 261, it would affect the increased percentage.
Okay, so
Salaries are adjusted per diem, not.
they have to be
In the system.
payroll.
in the payroll system. So the payroll system does the number.
We're getting this legislative board, I mean, all exempt salaries should make the same, no matter how it's calculated.
It doesn't affect what you make, Dave. It affects what fiscal year it's posted in. So like your first payroll of the year is actually split across fiscal years. So even though the salary doesn't change, what year it applies to does change. So when you have a year that goes from 262 days to 261 days, it's going to affect the percentage.
So it is a 2.5%, like we thought. We'll use the base,
So I was right.
we use the base supervisor salary, so the, 2010 supervisor salary is $19,138. 2.5% increase was applied to that, which yielded a 2021 base salary of $19,616. That's a difference of $478. You divide the 478 by last year or this year's salary, which is $19,138, you come to 2.4976%. So it's a 2.5% increase.
So the budget, this number should be amended to correct that.
No,
Nope.
the number's right.
If the per diem that Al said is correct, then that explains.
That's the number, right. It
I
just,
thought it was just 52 weeks, 52 weeks, 52 weeks.
right.
He's saying 52 weeks in a day, and then 51 weeks in 6 days, the next year. Or we're paying $1,000 less than everybody else across the board.
That's probably, that's probably the right answer.
Get what you pay for.
Okay. We go on.
Go ahead, Dana.
trying to tell me that through this entire budget we get, 94 pages, whatever that's gonna come out to be, that we're not gonna be able to take any of the wages by math and have it work out right, because there's some kind of a additional,
So,
couple extra days in there?
in short, yes, really the legislative board's the only one that you ever would have been able to get close to the 2.5%, because in every other department, you're gonna have steps and longevity and
Yeah.
changes. So you're almost never in any department going to be able to do math between adopted and have it come out to 2.5.
If it
That's,
does,
I mean,
it's a fluke.
the payroll is the most complicated part of the budget. There are literally hundreds of spreadsheets that go into developing those numbers. So, no, you can't just do gross math.
In this instance, it came in a little bit less than the gross math, so you think all through the budget, they would all be a little bit less?
No,
Or are they gonna be more?
because longevity and steps will add more.
Yeah, it'll be up and down a few percentage points on each one.
How are we supposed to provide oversight in that regard? When it comes to wages, we just kind of...
Well, you're doing the oversight by setting the steps, setting the longevity, and setting the wage scale. That's where your oversight is, but what that comes out to, it's almost like your benefits, your health insurance, your social security and all that. That's based on that wage, and it's gonna be whatever that percentage is, and you can't do anything about that. That's what you're required to pay. So, as long as you set the wage scale yourself, you know, the hourly rate, and you set the step, and you set the longevity, that is the oversight.
I don't think there's a town out there that has longevity, so that's probably why the town side, simpler math.
Yeah, this is less convoluted, yeah. Yep.
All right,
Can I,
thank you.
I just get, the handout that came out with the salary schedule, the salaries on the board are the same as the ones on the exempt salary schedule. They add up to $371,911, and then I round it up to $372. The printout has them at $371,911, and those salaries match the exempt salary schedule.
Yep,
Okay,
Thank you.
and that's at the 19,616.
okay.
19,616, and the salary for the other three positions match.
We are good. Thank you for the clarification, and thank you, Mr. Half, for getting us off right in the weeds where we belong.
So,
We did good.
does anybody have questions? Are you finished with your stuff? Any questions for Deb on your, quick of the board budget? Albert?
I just wanted to circle back real quick to confirm, I did check last year's budget request, and there was 262 days in 2020. So if you were to do an apples to apples comparison, the 2020 adopted budget would have been 362,611. So I think if you adjusted the 2020 adopted budget that was days to days, it would reflect that 2.5%. You're going to be off consistently through the budget because of that extra day in 2020.
Well, I'm glad my memory was good on that one.
Okay,
We'd still be trying to figure out how that happened.
okay. County administrators up next.
Okay, revenue on county administrator, you'll see the 14,211 that was state aid, other governmental support on the amended 2020. That was the remnants of the highway feasibility study. That is not going to be carried forward into 2021. Therefore, the only revenue in the county administrator department is $2,500. That is for the raise the age on-call phones. We just pay them all centrally out of my budget for ease of record keeping and administration. On to the next page of expenses. You'll see the wages, the 2.5% is represented there. The fringes are what they are. Nothing in the office equipment budget. Going down into the .4s, everything is pretty flat, except we dropped our office supplies a little bit. And you'll notice that the contracted expenses, the .4040, is up $5,500. That's because it's an OPEB valuation year, so all our contracts are flat, except for that OPEB valuation that we have to do. I may have also put a small escalator on the audit contract, as we need to go out to RFP for those services again. See if there's anything else of interest in here. You will see that the $14,211 that I referenced before is in the 2020 amended budget under grants other. That's zeroed out. That won't carry forward. Any questions on any of that?
Go ahead, Dave.
Dana?
Brian, this is for you. Was this report generated before we heard that the state will increase the retirement contribution 16%? Because I see your state retirement is less than the 2020 amended. I'm wondering, that information catching up yet?
We believe it is.
Yeah, so you can't look at the fringe benefits, really. Well, Al did amend it. We budgeted the fringe benefits differently before. We budgeted them all in the pool, now we're budgeting them in the department. You'll see variations from department to
That's why
department.
the adopted says zero on 20.
Just in how it was spread through. But yes, we did know that the increase in retirement was coming. We think that we are good with the retirement number that's currently in these reports.
So if the 2020 amended budget was 29,000, but the department requested almost 28, maybe it was a little overfunded last year?
No. It was budgeted, this was a discussion he didn't want. Because he doesn't like my net cost.
The amended.
Okay, so under net cost, all the benefits were put in on one line item. So the retirement was all together. When we voted to move them back, just so we had a guideline to go by, they just got spread by the percentage by department. So that number is a percentage. Occasionally, even one of them's higher or is lower than what they actually spent because we can't go back and amend what was done in the past. But we spread them through just so you could see that they're close to accurate.
Okay, so if I look at any fringe in this whole budget, anything that's the 2020 amended budget fringe is just a...
There's not gonna be, right.
It's close.
It's a very close estimate, but it's just to give us a guideline so we're not way out of whack is what it's for.
Yeah. It's not a meaningless number, but it's also not to the penny.
Right.
It's more the aggregate that's the important number.
Yeah, especially in their health and medical benefits, I mean, that varies based on
Who takes what?
double, whatever they take, so it'd be hard to apportion based on some of the big departments.
No, I was asking about
What
the
is it?
retirement.
No, I just,
Very good.
I was waiting for the next question.
You are gonna be driving me drink, there's no question.
Okay, if that's it. Yep.
So I assume your point four is, since we're only at 58,000 for this year, some of these are not spread out for 12 months, they just hit all at once.
Yeah.
And that by the end of the year, you're probably gonna be right where you need to be. Thank you.
Yep. The one thing that we won't, which is, we don't have that column. So, I'll be under budget on travel and some other stuff like that because obviously I'm not going anywhere. So, if you go to the next page, it's, stockroom, which technically falls under us as well, the 1660 department. So we talked about this a couple years ago. We centralized all of the copier purchasing into the stockroom. We had budgeted $20,000 this year. I think we're only gonna spend $11,000. I don't have plans to buy any new copiers this year. I kept the placeholder in there for next year of the $20,000 for copier replacements. And then you'll see also that this year we adopted $55,000 in equipment, which we talked about at the time was not an every year thing. And it was simply because we anticipated moving some departments over to Burgoyne and figured that we would need to outfit new department space over there. Obviously, we really didn't move anybody, because of certain situations that arose. So, in further talking to Matt about we're moving code enforcement over there now and moving nurses, I don't think we need as much as we thought we might have originally. So I cut that line down to 20 from the 55. So as of now, in the stockroom, and this is for all departments, we've got budgeted $20,000 for new copiers or other miscellaneous technology equipment, and $20,000 for office furniture, which almost exclusively would be Burgoyne Avenue.
Any questions for Chris?
All right, next one, that falls under my purview is 1910, which is unallocable insurance. So this is our insurance that we can't really ascribe to any particular department or operation or fund. And so you'll see that it's up, $12,000 over the amended budget. And that is NYMER's planned rate increase for the upcoming year. And if there's no questions, that's it for me.
Any question, anything that, Chris presented? Let's move on to Mr. County Attorney.
Good morning.
Morning, Larry.
So, going through my budget, if you look at the .1s, they're gonna be a little confusing because if you'll recall, we had half a year of safety officer built in. We didn't fill that until just last week, but we also changed the title to safety coordinator, which is a lower compensation amount. So for next year, we have a full year of safety coordinator built in, which would be less than the safety officer, but that's part of the change. And then we have the steps and increments and the two whatever it is % built in. So that's how the .1 number works out, but it's going to be tough to do a direct comparison because of that half year in the vacancy.
I have a question before we move on.
Yes, Dan.
Who do we charge back, safety officer?
Yeah, so, if you go back one page from where Roger just was, in the county attorney revenue, it's, a chargeback revenue of in the, requested budget of $161,758. So what that is we changed the way we did the accounting a number of years ago, where now the, all of the expenses for the two safety officer positions reside in the county attorney's budget. But because specifically those expenses are 100% workers' comp, there is a chargeback between the workers' comp fund and the county attorney. So that $161,000 is the cost of those two safety officer positions. Then there is a voucher that's processed at the end of the year that charges the workers' comp fund for that, so that then the expenses are spread out in workers' comp. You'll see that it was not done in 2020, this current budget year, but it was in previous years. So the budget officer has recommended putting that back in to the 2021 budget.
So what is the magnitude going workers' comp? Because all the towns pay that, we've all seen an increase in that.
It's $161,758.
And that's the point, is that's who uses it. We all use it, so we all pay a portion of it. Because our EMS uses it, our fire uses it, our town in general uses it. It's, workers' comp is covered by all that. So that's how we get it spread out so everyone pays their fair share.
But there's two pools of workers' comp, there's the county pool and then the town's pool. So does the county pay back itself also? If we have a county worker that has workers' comp?
So there aren't really two pools in the workers' comp fund. There's pooled expenses. Then those are broken out based on the formula between the county, which is our workforce, and all of the EMS and fire. Then your towns and villages have their expenses broken out by your formula. So it's one pool. So this $161,000 goes into the general pool. Then the county pays its share, the towns pay their share, and so on.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
But that was an excellent question, because I don't know that everyone has gotten that full. Well, yeah, but I don't think we've gotten that full picture before, and I think it was a great explanation, but it was a good question, because I don't think everybody realizes that's how workers' comp works, and we cover EMS, fire, town, county, we cover it all.
Roger, continue on, please. John?
I got a question about the workers' comp. That all goes into one fund, the towns and everything.
Yes.
Now, at some point when a town's workers' comp is paid up, is that, when the town pays it, is that a revenue or how's that work?
So the amount that the towns and villages pay is represented as a revenue in the workers' comp fund. So it's a totally separate fund than general fund, and that's actually what this revenue and expense that we're looking at here is the mechanism to get those expenses covered by the workers' comp fund. So when we get into the small funds, I will give you a report that is detailed on the expenses and the revenue for the workers' comp fund. And under the workers' comp fund, that shows up in what we call workers' comp assessment. And that's the amount that we charge the towns, villages, and ourselves.
And just to tie that all together, John, that comes as a portion to your bill that's an add-on to your, tax bill.
No, I know that.
Okay?
Any other questions on unemployment or workers' comp? Roger?
I have enough problems with workers' comp. I don't want to do unemployment as well. So going down to the contractual expenses, you'll see we reduced our travel because a lot of our training and most of that is done through the safety office for Phil has gone online. So most of the time we have to go to Rochester RIT to get those courses. They've gone online now. I don't see that changing for the foreseeable future, so we won't be driving to Rochester as much. And then the famous consultant line, which is things that I'm either conflicted out of or don't possess the expertise to handle, is started at 25 when I first got here, has gradually gone to 15, and it has been cut to 7,500 in the last couple of years. That number can be whatever you really want it to be, because we're gonna need it when we need it. So 7,500, 20, 15, whatever number you'd like to put in there. I put the 15 in there as I traditionally have done, but it's one of those numbers that, some years you don't spend any of it, and some years you spend all of it. And we've had both those kind of years. This year, fortunately, I'm gonna knock on, we haven't spent any of it, I don't believe, or very little of it.
So 2018, we spent none. 2019, we spent 2,056. To date, 2020, we spent 2,237.
Right. I don't want to jinx myself, but
Does anyone want to,
You may have already.
you want to adjust that down to 7,500 again, or?
Yes.
I think what Roger was trying to get at was if the board wanted to put that at 7,500, that works, with the understanding that if he comes to you and says, I really need more in the consultant line because we have X, Y, Z, please entertain that request, because when he needs it, we really need it.
Well,
Yeah.
the same statement, hold through with 15,000, if you put that in there, something.
And you need 30, you still gotta give them,
Without a doubt, yes.
yeah.
Well, put us on notice not to do the knucklehead stuff that we do, so we wouldn't need to hire an outside consultant.
So we agree to reduce that 7,500?
Well, if it's just a guess, why do you double last year? It's an expense, you should be increasing expenses. Don't have to. Take it back to 7,500. Sounds reasonable.
Okay, done. Roger?
yes, sir. The postage and everything, our postage has been way down this year because we haven't had court, so we haven't had to do a lot of the certified mailings we normally do. Court is, for the moment at least, starting back up. So I believe that if things go the way they go, we'll be right back up next year in terms of mailing. The training and staff development, we added a little bit of that because we have a new person, so we'll probably need to do some training for her, the coordinator, and everything else should be flat. So really the only expense changes that you see are the .1s and a little bit of the contractual. I know Westlaw is going to raise my rate, so we build in a little something for that because that's never gone down in the 25 years I've been here. But other than that, it should be fairly familiar to what you've seen in past years.
Okay. Any other questions for Roger?
Thanks, Roger.
Thanks, Roger.
You're welcome.
County Clerk.
County Clerk is Stefan.
Good morning.
Good morning, Stephanie. How are you?
Stephanie.
Tired, but I'm getting there. Sorry, I'm at home, so I don't have my other papers, from the office. I am returning from my daughter's wedding this weekend. So I'm just gonna go with what we received from, Sandy on the budget that you guys printed. On my revenue, I decreased the, clerk's fees a bit, for next year because I really don't know that will change a lot with the, courts. We still aren't able to do parts of the foreclosures. We aren't able to do default judgments yet. There's still stuff we're not able to do, which does bring in revenue to the county. So to play it safe with any changes that may be still going on with COVID, I decreased that a slight bit. Also, our DMV is down. That is going to be a complete mess. The commissioner and the governor have put more stuff online for individuals to do as opposed to coming into the office. So that goes to the Utica Fund, which we do not get any percentage from until we meet our threshold, which is almost $500,000, which is set by the state. So we are getting that sooner, but as opposed to it being 12.7% that we get here, it's only 2.4%, I believe was the last total we got. So that's a substantial difference in what we are receiving in revenue.
So just a question for Chris Arell. The 2020 actual amount is as of August 30th?
I'm sorry?
I was just asking Chris Arell if the 2020 actual amount is as of August 30th?
The 945,000, Steph, do you know if that's as of the last of August?
I believe so. I did it, yes, because that's
Yes.
when I took the numbers last.
That's through August 30th, yes.
Through August 30th, okay, thank you. So we saw a potential shortfall out of that this year through no fault of our own. Okay, sorry, Steph, I just want clarification on that.
Nope, that's okay. I, with the months that we were off, I knew we were going to still have a shortfall. I was hoping to get a lot of it back, but unfortunately, even though the state office is closed, which I think this was a huge misconception for counties, is that even though the state closed the DMV offices, the county offices could still be processing. I've had a conversation with Chris and Brian that if by chance in the fall we get hit again with COVID, to please consider not closing the two offices and still letting us process things, because they did send stuff to the state and the state sent them to counties that were processing. So we did lose revenue, even though we started working back in May and June. We still lost revenues for those months that the state sent stuff to the other counties. So unfortunately, we live and learn, and this is something that I have put forth in one of the requests from Chris to, in going forward, we can half staff, we can maneuver things in the office, we can keep the drop boxes going. There's many avenues we can do without having people in the office and still keep that part of the revenue functioning for the county.
Okay,
Very good.
thank you, Steph, for that.
With that said, the only things that increased were the earnings, which was based on what was allowed through the board, And unfortunately, the hit that we got, was my postage. At the very beginning, everything was going back, which normally we would have the people there. The United Postal Service increased their fees per the president, so our fees for returning plates increased. So you will see that we got hit quite hard on that for the end of the month, and that was my only increase that I made, just because we don't know what's going to happen in the winter months with having to do mail-ins back.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe I'm asking this because I'm sitting too close to Dana, but, regular wages go up about 8.5%. Yeah, I can see that there's gonna be steps of longevity in there, but that seems a little extreme. And the second is, under, hospital, employee benefits, it went down like $37,000, which is a good thing. Is it because somebody who was on the plan has jumped off the plan, or somebody we hired new didn't?
So, pay no attention to the fringe benefit cost behind the curtains. Spread differently is why that number went down. So different formula to spread the big number. That's all on that one. On the .1, there is, I believe there's an additional position.
Was there a part-time position put in there or something?
It's the triage clerk.
Yes.
It is the difference.
We did that in 2020, so that would continue on to 2021.
Right.
Yes.
Actually, it's additional person in the staffing center.
Right, that was added this year, not next year. It's just gonna be funded for the full year instead of part of the year.
That makes sense. I hate when they have the
Albert?
I hate it when they have the
I just want to touch base on that health insurance real quick. Across the entire budget, 2020 adopted, 2021 requested, that the health insurance, because of the switch in carriers, is down $1.8 million. So you will see that savings spread through every department. So.
Stole my thunder, dude.
Oh, Matt was asking about the health
I
insurance.
won't ask it in every department from now on, I'll write it down.
Oh, come on!
I'm just not used to Al bringing good news, that's what I'm just talking about.
Oh, I
He
mean, it's
wasn't
not,
supposed to. Chris was gonna bring that, now so is Thunder, so hey.
No, so I didn't want to get into it now and it detract from government ops. Al's absolutely right. We had a lot of discussion between Al, Sue, Brian, and I. One of the reasons that we switched carriers was after 2 or 3 years of me beating the heck out of Blue Shield, I could not get them to agree that our real claims number was $5.5 to $6 million. They kept coming in with a maximum liability number of 8.2, 8.6. And so this year, finally, Blue Cross came to the table and said, yeah, our actuaries agree with you. You're at 5.6. And so our cost for health insurance went down by several $1 million.
And that was a different set of Blue Cross, right? That was Empire instead of Anthem or whatever.
It's Empire Blue Cross.
It's Empire.
Now, it's a little complicated because that health insurance plan renews in June. Okay? So we know our rate for the first 5 months of the year. There's 7 months of the year that is unknown. However, after a lot of discussion and some back and forth with the carrier and the broker, what we discussed was that if you'll remember recently we talked about the Humana renewal, and the Humana renewal was down 14% temporarily. It's a 1-year thing, and it's because utilization was very low during the shutdown. You couldn't go to the doctor, right? You couldn't get elective procedures. We're seeing the same thing in our claims numbers in our general health insurance. So we have every reason to believe that our renewal starting June 1st is going to be flat or low. But we want to go into that with the understanding that there are long-term costs to short-term cost avoidance when it comes to healthcare. So if you didn't go in and get that cancer screening, or you didn't go in and get your blood pressure medicine renewed or whatever, we may have more costs down the road. So because of the budget situation we're facing, after long conversations with the budget officer, we decided to recognize the savings this year, but that we needed to have a frank conversation with the board that that may not be perpetually recurring savings. So I do think that our plan number is more around high 5, 6 million, and I could not get Blue Shield to admit that. Now that we have Blue Cross on board, that's where we're gonna program for, with the understanding that there may be some costs down the road.
Now?
And I'll give you a little teaser.
Yeah.
I'll give you a little teaser because everybody likes the Paul Harvey moment. So there's going to be more to this story when we do the small fund. So please stay tuned and tune into the small fund conversation.
Anyone else have a question?
Think so.
Okay.
That's all I've got for that one. If you want to move on to the historian.
Let's do history.
Go for it.
Al?
And I have no idea where these numbers came from.
Stephanie, hold on a second. Al had a question.
Brian and
Tell me
Chris,
when you'll drip on your soup.
Brian and Chris, I know that it's not part of Stephanie's request in front of her, but one of the most constant requests I've heard from the board over the past couple of months is about mortgage tax. Before she leaves her department, did you want to have her talk a little bit to that?
Sure.
What do you see so far in mortgage tax, Stephanie?
Well, I see a lot of people coming into DMV, so I'm really, like I said, I apologize. I'm not at the office where I could pull that information up. I do know that we are getting, a lot of people are refinancing because the rates were low during COVID and stuff like that, but I can pull all that information, or I can have Benita pull that up for you and get it up to you today.
Okay. Ryan?
Yeah.
For June, I'm showing the additional mortgage tax money for June was at 35.5, and the money she just sent up for August was at 60,400. So between June and August, we jumped from 35.5 to 60,400. So the additional mortgage tax is definitely reflecting a significant increase.
Yes. Yep. Maybe not any more than what we budgeted though.
No, but I just thought that would be something that might be a good time to talk about it.
Yep.
I have a question for Stephanie, once she's still here.
Yeah. Didn't have that question, Steph?
Under your expense, under the expense for miscellaneous supplies, mortgage tax, there's nothing listed where the 2020 actual was about 25,000, 2019 actual was about 50,000. There's nothing budgeted here. The other question I have is, what expenses do you have for mortgage tax? Is that where you charge back, the wage during the time that you process mortgage tax? I don't quite understand that.
I didn't hear that last part, Dana, sorry.
I can
Al's got the answer.
I can speak to that, Mr. Haff. If you remember the way that we distribute the mortgage tax to the towns now, under the new formula that Stephanie brought to you, you pass 2 mortgage tax resolutions. One is the regular distribution, then one is your share of that extra money that Stephanie holding. This expense for mortgage tax is where we distribute that money to the towns. So if you remember twice a year when you pass the mortgage tax resolutions, you pass 2. That second resolution that you pass for the additional money is expensed out to you, and that's what that expense is.
Okay, why would there be a revenue line so that it balances out?
Right, so the revenue to that is the additional mortgage tax money. It's not in her department, though. It's in the pool.
But if the expense to distribute to the town is in her department, shouldn't there also be offset by that same revenue coming into her department?
There is, but it's not in her department.
Neither one is what you're saying, Al. Neither one's in their department.
the expense is in her department, but the revenue is not.
Well, why would we budget something for 2021 if we already know we're gonna pay it out in 2020?
The resolution that you passed normally has the budget amendment in it.
So we budget zero for now, then we do it when we do it?
Yep.
Let's make the rules to go along here, don't we? Well, I can understand in the past, it's been, well, because the pass-through doesn't really matter, because what comes in goes out. I see it going out, I just don't see it coming in.
It comes in a different department within general fund.
But how can you have a revenue come in for different departments than the one that's expending it?
We do that all the time. I mean, the tax levy and sales tax, which is our two biggest revenues, are in pooled unallocable, but they support all the general fund operations.
Okay.
In municipal, as long as it's in the same fund, it's fine.
General fund,
Correct.
okay.
All set?
Historian, go ahead.
Okay, so on the historian, looking at this, and I will admit this is last night, first time I looked at it. I don't know where these revenue totals, these large numbers came in for the historian.
Yes, don't ignore those.
Department,
Correct.
it's not a historian.
It's not historian.
Okay,
If that's the case, we need more historians.
They grew $120 into $2 million, that's pretty good.
That's a nice return.
Sorry.
the only thing that increased with the historian was the regular earnings. Everything else I kept the same, without knowing what are actually entailed for opening her back office.
Okay. Any questions on history? Okay. Any comments or questions? Dan?
Yeah, this has nothing to do with, the county clerk, but it's just, I guess I have to apologize for coming in late, it might be explained already. The COVID expense in every department, is that a specific cost to every department, like overtime, or is it a total of all the COVID expenses?
So the COVID line is just gonna be .1.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yep, so everything else that we did for COVID as far as buying anything was run through a separate account that we're currently finalizing our submission to FEMA on. It should go in, I'm thinking, by the end of the week.
The one going to FEMA, now, is that reimbursable, right, or percent of it?
75%.
But this line here that you're tracking for us is not reimbursable as of yet?
As of now, no, it is not.
Okay, thank you.
And I will freely admit that I probably didn't set up the pay codes correctly when we started all this. In hindsight, it would have been good to have more granularity of the data. I have gone ahead and done that now, so that if we do another shutdown, I will have much better data for you. And Al and I have had some conversations about this. One of the downsides is that the COVID line in the .1s now makes it very convoluted to try to look at where are we currently on .1s, where are we going to end the year, and how does that compare to next year. So I do apologize for that. It does kind of cloud things when you look at the .1s, but it was the best we could do at the time, and we'll do better next time if we have to.
So Chris, just look at the historian. So on the historian COVID line, 2020 actual is 5,685. So that represents that block of time that the .1 wage would have been paid during COVID. So that's allocated to COVID, that entire regular wage, yes. Where's the time and a half? Would we find?
There was probably no time and a half in that line.
Everywhere?
Yes, so for this individual, there wasn't time and a half.
Right.
So this would represent basically the time we were shut down and she was out on COVID. In a department that continued to function, yes, you would see that COVID line would contain the time and a half for when they worked.
And the regular.
And the regular, yes, and that's part of what I was alluding to, that then is very complicated. It's very hard for me and Al to then tease out from that number and report to you what was done. Now, we have different codes moving forward, not for the time and a half, but just if somebody's home working, or if somebody is home unable to work, we'll be able to report out on all that kind of stuff if it happens again.
Okay, but the .1 COVID wage expenses are still ongoing today, because aren't we still in a state of emergency in the county?
So we are still in a state of emergency. The COVID payroll expenses right now are minimal, and we've had just onesie twosies come up where somebody's sick and we get put on quarantine while they're awaiting their test results. We have a policy that the board adopted right at the beginning of all this, that if you're out on a formal quarantine order, you're under the COVID payroll. So the COVID pay code is still used for those situations, but at this point, it's pretty narrow.
Okay, then I would say April, all wages paid out would be underneath this.
Yes.
When did we switch from all wages to person?
So that would have been as we started to reopen, which was May, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Chris, is the hazard pay included in that
Yes,
line?
it is.
So is that where you can't freak out?
We can. It's just not clear for you. What I would prefer is that I had thought ahead and made a separate line for that, so that you could very easily see on the report X number of dollars was paid for the hazard pay. And I didn't structure the pay codes correctly when we did that. So it's in that line.
That's about 700,000, right?
It's about 680, yes.
Chris, because they're still working through weekends, that they're on COVID line, the health department, when they're making their calls and see.
No, I think at the current, we are just, running them through regular pay. And when they are working on the weekends and whatnot, they're just charging regular overtime.
Questions before we move to treasurer? Alan, we're ahead of time. Can you start early?
Yeah, ready whenever you are, sir.
You can go ahead.
Okay. So, we'll start with my revenues, and I'm embarrassed to say that getting ready for this meeting today, I discovered 3 errors in my own budget. So, we'll be talking about those. And I sent a little summary out to you all last night so you could look it over in preparation of today, so as not to waste your time. This clown looking over my shoulder is really freaking me out, so. The treasurer's fees account, you'll see that I dropped that by $4,000. The main reason I chose to do that is, as you remember, our illustrious governor this year, through the budget process, passed the bail reform, and there are much less occurrences of when somebody can actually be locked up and bailed out. The occurrences of bail are a lot more rare. And in this line in the past was the 3% poundage that I keep when I refund the bail to people. So if we have less people being held on bail, there is in theory less bails being refunded, and in theory less poundage being collected on those bails. So I've dropped that number considerably, reflecting the fact that there's not going to be as much bail refunds going forward. And most of that line is going to end up being the tax searches that we prepare for people ongoing. So that's why the decrease in that first revenue line. The next one of interest is the 2210.08. That's the amount that I charge the sewer district for the payroll, accounting, and collecting services that we provide. One of the things that you can choose to talk about, maybe when Joey B comes and does his presentation, is if there's any desire or need to expand that beyond my office. So right now we do a chargeback to the sewer district for his April and October user fee collections, the payroll services that we provide them, and the accounting services we provide them. What we don't currently directly bill them for is any of Chris's time, Debbie's time, the IT support that they get from us. So if we need to expand that chargeback, that's probably something more appropriate for when we go to Public Works. But that line represents what I charge back to sewer district for my services. The next line, that's the general services, other governments for $10,000. That's the first of my 3 mistakes. Well, it's not really a mistake. When I submitted my budget request, the Lake Champlain Regional Planning Board had not yet been awarded their grant. As you're aware, they've received $2.3 million in revolving loan funds. They're going to pay for 2021 and 2022. They're going to pay the county an additional $10,000 for me to do the bookkeeping on those revolving loan funds. So we already get paid $10,000 for the bookkeeping services that I provide now. For the next 2 years, they're going to provide an additional $10,000 through the EDA grant to do all the bookkeeping services for the new revolving loan fund that's directly related to the COVID-19 effect on local businesses. So that line that's 10,000 should actually be 20.
Okay.
And the next line down, that's general services other, that's currently at 0. That line is supposed to be the money that I charge Fort Anne and Fort Edward schools for collecting their school taxes. I have not any indication that I won't be doing it again next year. So that line should be 5,223 if I don't increase my charges. And like I said, as long as the schools are willing, we are still willing to do that collection. And honestly, if there's other schools that wanted to have a conversation, I'd be open to a conversation. Because my understanding is Glens Falls National has gotten out of the business. So there may be more schools looking to do things differently. But that line should at least be the 2 schools that we're currently doing.
Okay.
That's all my hits and highlights on the revenue side.
I have a question, Brad.
Yes, sir.
Is the discrepancy in the 2 numbers between Fort Anne and Fort Edward just based upon number of parcels, number of
Yes,
tax bills?
I bill them on a per parcel count, Matt, and much to my surprise, Fort Edward was about half of Fort Anne's number.
Okay.
My regular earnings line, Mr. Half, this will be one of those ones that your 2.5% just won't fly because there's a couple things going on here. From 2020 to 2021, 2 of my account clerks have been raised to senior account clerks. But by the end of this year, I have a 25-year employee that's going to be retiring. So I'm going to have a 25-year bookkeeper that will be filled by a first-year account clerk. So there's a significant breakage in that payroll number. So you see that my payroll is only up $1,000 or so. If it was apples to apples, my payroll would have been more around almost $18,000 in increase. So that $1,000 increase in my .1s isn't reflective of what you might expect to see. But there are, like I said, there's 2 upgrades in there that were account clerks going to senior account clerks, and that happened July of this year. And then a retirement, so there'll be a significant breakage between the 25-year bookkeeper and its replacement at a first-year account clerk. So what you'll see though is over the next 3 or 5 years, that account clerk will go back on that path. Because of the duties that are involved, that account clerk won't stay account clerk forever. So while I get savings next year, those savings kind of dwindle in the out years as the duties go up in that position. So I just want to be transparent that yes, it's $18,000 savings next year, but that number starts to whittle down as they start learning the payroll duties and take on the new duties.
I believe, Al, this will be a discussion in personnel in about 3 months when we're deciding about families and how they work.
Yeah, there's been a long desire to
Steal my thunder today.
there's been a long desire to do something different. We'll see what that looks like. What's nice is
I have a brilliant, elegant solution in my brain. It's just getting it out on paper.
We're gonna help him through it, aren't we, Al?
Hey, Brian, with me and you helping him out, what could go wrong, right?
It's kind of where they came up with the idea of crash and burn?
So you'll have it ready for full today.
Okay.
I'll be crash, you be burned. So I don't have any equipment requests for next year. But based on the maintenance agreement that I have and the technician who continues to come and see me, I have a feeling that in either 2022 or 2023, the folder sealer machine that we use for stuffing paychecks and tax bills and stuff like that, that machine is nearing end of life. So I don't have anything for next year, but I do have something on the horizon.
Can we send them all electronically?
That would be fantastic.
That's what I was thinking.
I wouldn't hold your breath though.
Yeah, I know.
Well, the question is now, can we do a portion electronically and the balance by mail? Most people must have some sort of email account.
And as far, you ready to move on? Or are we still going?
You go ahead.
Right. So my .4s show that they're up about $8,700, but that's mostly due to the fact that the expenses from bond counsel and fiscal advisors for renewing our BAN, they're up, and we actually under budgeted for 2020. So we'll be looking at a budget amendment later this year to cover those costs. Most of the people that are involved with the BAN renewals, their fee isn't fixed. Their fee is based on the amount of the borrowing. So as we borrow more money, their fees increase. So every time we add another $1 million to that borrowing, it's reflected in the fee that they charge us. So you'll see that I bumped that from 5,000 up to 14,000 because this year's came in at 13,600. So I don't see that number going down anytime soon, as long as we continue to renew those bands. And if it wasn't for that, my .4s would have actually been down. So they would have been down.
Is that actually your final for the year with them, Al?
Yes, I don't have any more borrowings for this year.
Okay. Thank you.
And we should only have the same amount again next year unless you do something creative. Is there any questions on my department before I move on?
No? Any questions?
So the department 1360. Go ahead, Dana.
Well, I think maybe 1362 that you're about to get to, but wouldn't the revenue for 1362 be in your 1325 somewhere?
So, yes, if you,
Tax sales.
so if you flip back to my revenue page, there's lines that are 1325, 1235, that's filing fees, abstracting and posting. Those are the only offsets that we have to those. The one I think you're alluding to, Mr. Haff, is the will be in the 1364 department. It's the next department we'll talk about. 1362, this is where the expenses are for that October certified mailing that I have to do. This is where the expense for all of the notices come from. So this one is partially funded by those mailing fees that you see in my revenue department, in my department in the revenues. Which is, it's $7,000 revenue in my department that offsets this 16,000. But like I said, that department is just for sending the notices out, the required notices. So moving on to 1364, I think speaks to your question, because this is where you had the $15,000 that came from the auction that we put into the reserve account. I think that's the one that you're inquiring about, possibly?
No, I think Mr. Haff was looking for the $250,000 in revenue from the tax auction. Is that correct, Mr. Haff?
Well, more like 400,000
It's a zero in the budget.
But where's the line?
It's in a different-
We did have it in 2020, but there should be some numbers in.
It's not, but it's not in my department, it's in the pool.
Yeah, I put that number in, so I don't think it's in your handout.
But that's not the treasurer's department?
No.
No, it's in the pool, that's what Al just said.
Yeah, that's one of those ones that's spread across the county in the pool, not specific to my department.
No, I'm talking about when we have the tax auction every year, the revenue that comes in from that certainly doesn't get spread out to the pool.
It does.
That's where it's accounted for, yes.
Well, that's a great way to hide all that money, so that nobody like me can see it. So what pool are you talking about?
It's in general fund.
Yeah, it has its own line. It's just not under government ops. So I guess that's what we're trying to say.
Yeah, so you'll get that at some point. Probably,
It's at the end of the general fund revenues. It's a department number,
Gotcha.
number 9,900, pooled unallocable.
Yeah, that's very, a really big $6 experience. Other revenue.
it's the same place where you see the sales, same place you see the sales tax and mortgage tax and the interest
Real
and
problem.
penalties. The interest and penalties that I charge on delinquent taxes, all of those live down in the pool. So as Chris said, if you have your big budget packet from last year, the very last department in general fund is all of those pooled revenues. But you'll see on 1364, I've taken the liberty to remove the $15,000 contribution to the reserve. For two reasons. Number one, I'm not sure what the status of any auction is going to be. And number two, the reserve is already built up over $300,000. I don't know how much bigger you want to grow that. I mean, you're welcome to, because I mean, you could get hit with a pretty big expense on a county-owned property. And maybe if the reserve gets big enough, you would take a chance on one of these contaminated properties that we normally pass on. There's a couple that I have in mind that I would like to have further conversations on that we've traditionally steered away from, and maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should be taking an action to send a message, but that's for a later date. But I have taken that $15,000 out. Now, I will say that at some point, the auction that was scheduled for October 3rd will happen. I don't know if that's going to be before the end of this year. I don't know if it'll be in spring of next year. I don't know if we're going to have two auctions together next October. I don't know when that's going to happen. But the auction that was scheduled for October will happen. The other news that I want to share with you that's different than when we met at finance, I have met with Roger, and in reviewing the law, we will be able to send out what I call the October notices. So we were concerned that missing the October 1st date really halted the whole process. The good news is the language in the law says basically no sooner than October 1st and as soon thereafter as practicable. So even if we have to send the notices out November, December, January, whenever we become allowed to send the notices, we will. So there in theory will be, there could be, I say could in air quotes, there could be two auctions next year or one auction with 2 years combined. So there's some unknowns still as far as the auction goes next year. But this line, my recommendation was to not putting more money in that reserve unless you specifically wanted to.
Okay. Any questions on all that? Okay, thank you very much, Al.
The only other one that I'm responsible for that I don't think is in your packet, so I probably don't want to talk about it. But there is a department that I'm responsible for that's the taxes on county-owned property. And there's not really a lot to that. We have 3 properties that we're responsible for paying the town and county taxes on. It's not in this packet, so I'm not sure where we'll see that. It's Department 1950. And the only reason I bring it up is because I think I have it budgeted too high for next year.
Okay.
I have it at 35.7 and I think it can actually go down to 32.5. And again, any of you that got the letter from me in your email last night, this is explained in that letter.
Got it.
Thanks for your time, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Al.
Matt Jones, you're up next.
All right. Basically, the whole budget is flat again this year. The only noticeable difference is in my .2, which is basically the change in the purchasing policy and that end of it, which allows smaller tools up to $500 to be .4 instead of .2, the fixed asset policy, I guess. So I decreased that, and I don't see any major equipment purchases as far as lawnmowers or anything to that effect this year. We're in pretty good shape, so the budget reflects that. The only other thing, I guess, is we aren't budgeting for our electronics tech for next year, which is moved to IT, and this budget does reflect that also. I guess, any questions? I guess that's the major changes.
So on the EOC revenue,
Revenue,
zeroed out at 7,500 last year. Chris?
I'm gonna refer to
EOC
EOC.
revenue, 1620,
Yeah,
120,
I get direction. I think Chris can answer this, or somebody, or Al.
I think that money was for the payback of the HVAC system, right? And that's all done?
It could be. That could be what it was. We have zero. That must be what it was, because
And there's
I think
also,
it's every year. We have no plans to do any major, issues where they're paying it back, I guess, right? Was that the controls? Comes from before me, I know that.
yes, it was a capital improvement, right, Chris, with the restructuring down in the basement and everything?
Yes. When we remodeled that office space and took the super secret hallway away.
Okay.
Your revenues are also down to 62,000. That was the rent at Burgoyne Avenue, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Right. The revenue was down 62,000. That was a 1-year shot, so I guess that was our Burgoyne with BOCES moving out. We don't have any revenue coming in.
I have one question for electric. In the 2021 department request, is Burgoyne now swept in with the rest of all the other electric?
Yep, there is a $10,000 electric request increase, which is partially due to the electric costs going up and Burgoyne. That's figured in for next year. So if you go, that's back. Electric has its own line. You could use, where is it here?
But in the future, Burgoyne's electric is gonna be just hooked into the rest of electric. That line will disappear in the future. That specifically says Burgoyne's electric.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be in 40/50. We do have it broke out, so I can tell you that this year, the actual amount is $7,714 for electric at Burgoyne.
Thank you.
Other questions for Matt on his budget?
Sue Clary?
Is the state aid on the court facilities, is that because of the reduction in New York State for 50%, that, 2018, 2019?
The state aid is based on in-house projects that we do for them, plus our cleaning crews that work over there at night and anything else. It's all based on formulas. We just got word that we're probably not going to be doing any projects over there. So as far as revenue, it's probably gonna be less than 100,000 this year.
Is there COVID-19 expenses in that facility?
Yeah, they'll be in there. There's a whole formula and process to how we get paid from the state aid courts. So when we do projects and it is 100% reimbursement, we are spending the money out of it. So it's kind of like an in and out. We're spending the money, but we're just getting paid back dollar for dollar. So the revenue isn't truly, we're making, revenue. It's just a swap of money. It comes out of my repair and maintenance lines and then gets paid back in that revenue line. So unless he gives me any projects, which I've been told that it's gonna be basically just our cleaning and our stuff like that, our cleaning over there.
Thank you.
Matt?
Yeah, this could be kind of nitpicky, but the water and sewer revenue went from 23,000 to 24,000, we budgeted 30,000, we're only at 12,000 this year so far. Is that 30 might be a little cushion in there, might be a little high?
It's a biannual payment.
But on the other side, we have water and sewer rents for going. We spent 385, should we budget something for that next year, or is that gonna be rolled in together eventually?
The electric is, I would hope we're doing it the same.
Yes. We don't have, right, water and sewer, that will be included in, we put 30,000. The 12,100 is a biannual payment, so we'll get another bill before the end of this year, which will get us.
Yeah, closer to 5 to 30, I mean, pretty close, but I just.
Well, I think the
When
rate,
I sit next to Dana, I'm looking at every $1,000.
I think he's trying to change rates there too though, right, Chris? So the rate's also gonna go up next year.
Okay. And then, under fuel, heating, natural gas, we spent 10,000 in 18, nothing in 19. We're budgeting 56,000 for this year and 55,000 for next year, but we haven't spent any on it yet. How's the number?
Maybe the bill hasn't arrived.
No.
We're still using it as far as I
Our
know, right?
fuel, no, I think what this is Al, do we have like minor accounts that didn't print out on this report that total up to that number? Because we should have.
Well, it shows we spent 0
I
in
can-
19, 0 in 20.
Right.
Is it someplace else?
Which one?
It's,
0.
620, 4190.
Let me get my worksheets out. Natural gas. Hang on a second here.
Yeah, I'll work with Brian after this meeting. It looks like there's children to this account that this year's actual is not populated in that field.
Right.
Or last year's either.
Yeah, we have, for our accounting purposes, we have them broke out per building, so we know how much building, each building is taken to heat. How much natural gas, how much electricity, and for some reason, they haven't totaled into that line. I can assure you that we are using that, and the numbers that I based on, I've trimmed it right to where we need to be. I mean, there might be a
I'm concerned that
very
we
small
budgeted
percentage.
here, and then we budgeted for where it actually lives.
No, so it lives in little tiny children account under those two.
Yeah.
What's happening is those children accounts, so it's like, if we look at the fuel, heating, natural gas, it's 4190. There's 4190.01, 0.02, 0.03, 0.04 that are the different, buildings, so it's municipal complex. They're not totaling up and rolling up, but they're in there, they're accounted for. It's just they're not showing in that one line.
For some reason, they're not rolling up in the program.
And they didn't roll it last year.
Yeah, I see that now.
So this year to date, they've spent 27,000. Last year was 49.5.
Thank you. And I have that, so when I run my budget reports and I work off, I'm looking at those numbers, and then when I just started looking at this for this presentation, they weren't there, so
Well,
that's my fault for not looking at this before.
Break them out, Brian, and separately, so we can look at them, or, they need to roll up.
They need to roll up. That's the way it's supposed to work.
We'll take a look at why they're not rolling up. I apologize.
Any other questions on, buildings and grounds? John Rozell?
Would the roof on Burgoyne Avenue be in his budget?
No, it'll be in the capital project budget.
Okay.
Just for clarification, outside services, 16, 20, 44, 20. We spent $90,000 in 18, nothing last year, nothing so far this year, we got $250,000 budgeted.
Same,
Same
What
thing.
about outside? Is there a roll up too?
same problem,
Yes.
Matt.
Yep.
Chase Kelly?
I think I have to be, but I'm not happy.
No.
I think it's always.
No, it doesn't roll up, you don't get the information, yeah.
Matt, I'm looking at the maintenance contract, you got 111,000 maintenance contracts. Is that every year? And like on tunnel lines, what do we get for 27,000 a year? You know, or on generators, it's 12,000 a year, you could almost be buying generators with that. So what are we getting and are they every year?
Yep, these are every year service contracts, obviously. So the Eastern Automated Logic, the one you picked up, that was 27,000. That's our control system for all our, really it includes lighting, heating, ventilation, and everything for all our buildings.
Oh, something goes wrong, is it 100% covered, or is that just those guys showing up and then we're paying for stuff on top of that?
We're paying on top of, there's a whole list of stuff, about 6 pages long, that is covered, but that's not everything, Jay. That's not all the labor. They come and they do all the updates. There is a certain amount covered, I mean, without getting in detail with that contract. We went over this, I think it was 2 years ago. It was quite a bit more, and I negotiated with them and we lowered the contract price not to cover labor and all the materials to get to that point. Without that, our system probably wouldn't run.
Part of that 27,000, if I'm remembering the contract correctly, part of that 27,000, I don't remember what percentage of it, we have to pay or else they turn our controls off. It's an annual access.
Right, and, right, the update on everything.
Yeah,
I mean, I just, I was looking at, you got the generators we're going now, the other generators, is that the ones that are out on the towers, or is that?
So we have
Yes.
multiple generators here, and then we have the generators out at the towers.
we have, I think it's 12 generators that covers.
All right, so they're hitting about 1,000 apiece coming in maintenance.
Twice a year. Some of them are much more. Jay, our big generators that run the jail in here, the contracts for those actually probably eat up most of that 12,000. So,
Okay, just curious, that's all.
Any other questions, Al?
Hey, Dave.
Al?
Just to roll back real quick to outside services. This year's year-to-date is 134.81. And last year's actual was 225.86.
and to add to that 134, you're not hitting the generator repair yet that's down at the jail, that will come out of that. There is a couple other small ones, so we estimated about 200,000. That was pretty fair estimate, and I see we took the 55 out already, so I still think we're gonna be right around the 200. Nothing's changed with that. Minus another big repair of something.
They took $55 last one, for this year, we put it back in for next year.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that was one of the things we talked about when we did that budget amendment at the last board meeting on Friday. The budget officer said that some of that stuff was just because we weren't here for 3 months, right? So part of that was Matt's guys were here and that they were kind of, keeping the lights on and stuff, but we weren't doing projects, we weren't doing repairs. So that saved us some money, even though the big generator down at the LEC recently had a major problem. We're still gonna be able to take that 55,000 out of that line. But because he was at 225 last year, and our stuff isn't getting any younger, Matt has requested to go back to the 250 for next year.
All set? And I think we got the parks to cover now.
Sure. I believe these are all staying flat also. The only thing noticeable, you want to do Hewlett's or Lauderdale first? So we're on the same.
We have
page.
Hewlett's first.
Yours first.
Hewlett's. Okay, the Hewlett's, I think everything stayed the same and the budget reflects that. The only difference would be just a little bit of fringe benefit stuff that's increased.
I have a question on Hewlett's revenue.
Yeah,
Just because I've never seen it before, but it says the 2020 actual, there's a negative revenue. I know by the time you take your revenue expense, sometimes you have a negative cost.
Mr.
I've
Nolet.
never seen a negative revenue.
No, I could, God knows. I know the answer to that too, so.
But somebody gave it to.
good, what's the answer? Good.
The answer is we refunded previously
Pavilion rental.
pavilion rental. Somebody somebody rented it and it came in last year for this year and we had to return it because they couldn't use it.
Wouldn't that be an expense?
No, because it came into a revenue account and then we had to send it back out, so it is literally a negative
It's
revenue.
return on all of our revenue.
Any other questions on Hewlett's?
Just a note, if you take the estimated revenue on Hewlett's, $2,000, the estimated expense, $54,000. So the county cost to operate a beach is $52,000 a year.
Any other questions on Hewlett's?
I think Mr. Half just supported net cost.
Pardon?
I think Mr. Half just supported net cost.
Yeah, you did.
We like that.
All right, how about Lauderdale, Matt?
Okay, obviously our revenue was way down this year, again, due to the COVID and not renting the pavilions and that sort of stuff. We did have some, we had a lot of people, so most of that 5,500 is just parking. We're hoping that we can go back to normal operation next year. That's why we've suggested our revenue be 18,000 again. Obviously, if we're still in COVID time, then it's going to be significantly less. And as far as the rest of the budget, the only noticeable thing is our equipment. I asked for 6,000. Our lawnmower is on its last leg at the park down there. Probably a 30-year-old lawnmower. We spent more time welding on it and trying to fix it and get it running this year than it's worth for sure. So we're pricing out new lawnmowers and we'd like to get one for next year.
I have a question on lawnmowers.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Zero turn?
What are you getting for 6,000? Another zero turn?
No, the reason is it's the 3,000 that we normally ask for and 3,000 for a lawnmower. So it would be just a heavy duty rider. It's the full 6,000 isn't the lawnmower.
Okay.
Matt, with all that being said, with the revenue being down, would you say the parks were probably utilized more than ever?
Yes. I'm correct. That's
That's what's
correct.
kind of interesting in this. There's no good way to charge, but it's, yeah, the utilization was huge during COVID.
Okay. Any questions on parks? Any overall questions for Al or for Matt?
Yeah, Jimmy Griffith?
Dave, Supervisor, yeah. Matt, what's the expense annually for upkeep on the lawnmower currently? Is that the 3,000 or is that?
No, the 3,000 would be, that's equipment. That could be buoys, that could be ropes for and we don't necessarily, like last year, we didn't use it, but we do know that we need a bunch of buoys. We got nicked for it this year with Department of Health, so It's just basically upkeep of the beach. So-
Okay, thank you.
All set? Thank you, Matt, appreciate it.
Good job, Matt.
Board of Elections.
Yeah, we're here.
Good, you're up.
Bye.
Hi,
Yep.
Jeff.
Hello. Leslie and I are here.
Okay,
Go ahead.
go ahead on your revenue and starting revenue, please.
Just look at it and ask questions, because we have been so busy since we've done this, we don't even know it's there any longer.
We just got done, the clear ballot was just here, we're trying to go through that with our training for that clear ballot, quick training. We're up over 3,000 requests for applications, the phones are going off the hook.
But that doesn't have anything to do with the budget.
But,
That's under revenue, under government, you just don't budget, put grant money in there until we actually get them.
Correct, so,
It's zero, but odds are we'll get something as we go along, depending on what they apply for.
We would hope.
well, so we really don't know. If we look at Board of Elections revenue, the only one that's real in there is the 3,300, which is election service charge. When we do elections for local governments, we charge them back. As Mr. Hicks was saying, the bottom revenue line is state aid, other governmental support, that's, grants. So we had some existing grants, and then we got new ones under the COVID emergency. It remains to be seen, because next year is not a presidential election, and hopefully the state stops monkeying with how we do elections, maybe there won't be any grants next year.
So you just budget zero. and we'll
Correct.
budget when it comes.
Yeah, and if we don't spend everything they have now this year, we'll roll it forward, do an amendment at the time. If we get a new one, we'll do an amendment. We don't have anything we can count on.
Three of these grants, one of them has to be, cleared by the end of November. Two of them have to be done by the end of December. The last one we have is a cybersecurity grant, which ends, December of '21. But the other three have to be done this year.
So the other one can roll over.
Potentially.
It doesn't really roll over, it's there until
21.
through 21. And that's for like 86,000, and it's for cybersecurity.
So it's 24,000 now, on December 31st, it might show a little bit more, but when Al closes it out in March, it could say 100,000, we just don't know until it all comes through. Gotcha.
Dave,
Yes,
Leslie, can you talk about why your payroll is down?
Because we have one less election next year, we had it up because of the presidential primary, and we won't have that next year, so we're down to just 2 elections. So,
We won't have that extra primary.
so we don't have to pay out of payroll all our inspectors.
Thank you.
Yep.
thank you. So pretty much all the other expenses are about flat from last year.
Our printing is up a little bit just because with all these extra, with the cards and so on, with the dates changing, we don't know with our acknowledgement cards and transfer cards, they might be changing the wording, and same with, we don't know with these envelopes, the different wording, we might have to, do more printing as the time goes with them changing the wording on things. So we put extra money in there for printing.
Do we have a new estimate for the number of ballots that are gonna be mailed out?
Right now, the
We're over
absentees
3,000.
we're over 3,000.
But is that higher than you thought you'd be now, or?
It's not as high as we thought, but it's over twice as many as last year.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
at, figure 4,000.
Yeah,
Oh, right now.
Grant expense.
I'm gonna run it.
Oh, where are the grant expenses?
No, I see it, 1450,
Yeah.
it's the last one. So we budgeted 0 for this year, we amended it to 35,000, we've actually expended 29,000, we have 0 for next year. So I see grants on the other side, revenue on it, we just talked about.
And this is when we spend it out.
So in that line, that's a .4. So what we did was we hired, the company that runs our elections database software to do that, big postcard you all just got in the mail that has the updated thing. So that was an executive order. We had about a week to turn it around. We couldn't do it internally. So Board of Elections hired that company. That's what that expense is, of the 29,000. There may, and I think there is other mailing in that line. Then you'll see there's a .2 grant other line as well. That's where we talked about, last board meeting or the board meeting before, purchasing the high-speed scanner, the folder, the letter opener, the timestamp, the equipment. Board of Elections felt they needed to do this higher volume of absentee ballots.
But in the budget, we see grants revenue actually being less than grants expense, because it hasn't caught up cash flow wise, because we've expended the money, had to pay our vendors, and then we submitted reimbursement we haven't gotten back yet.
So what should match is your amended.
I'm looking at the expense there, I see there's mileage expense, carpool, 600, but there's also auto fuel. Why do we still have auto fuel?
Yep.
They don't have a WEX card.
We have auto fuel because we have to pay fuel into the big Penske trucks that move all the machines.
Because
those are rented trucks?
Yes,
Yes,
we rent 2 very large box trucks from a private company just on the days around election to pack up with all the voting machines, roll them out to all the polling places, and then collect them again.
Okay, where is the expense for the rental of the truck? Is that in auto fuel?
No.
no, that's machine rental, 4210.
And so normally when you see a machinery rental, you're thinking it's highway machinery rental, but in this one, it's literally the rental of a machine from a private company.
Correct.
Matt?
So, the day before the election, the day after the election, we've hired a private vendor to come sanitize all
Yes.
the polling stations, correct?
Yeah,
We are not doing that for this election.
we did for the last one.
We're not doing it for the November election?
No.
What, they're cleaning?
Did it for what election?
The primary.
And the reason we're not doing it for the general, there's gonna be significantly more people is,
We're gonna have our inspectors clean the area.
okay. So that's why we're not budgeting anything for next year, we'll do the same thing next year, even though it'll be a smaller election. Okay.
I missed that.
I was under the impression that we were using those vendors again for the general, and I sort of.
Well, the cleaning,
Back in the and the inspectors are gonna do it, which will cut our costs down. And my costs.
Okay, should work. Good job.
thank you.
Board of Elections? So Leslie and Jeff,
Yep.
Matt had a question come up from his experience about, you talked to me about last night.
Yeah, I guess the question was gonna be, generally the presidential elections are pretty large, and you've got, what, 50 polling stations in the county?
We have 26.
Well, that's all. Okay.
That's all of them. All the polling spots will be open.
I think there's 50 districts is where you got
50 districts.
Doing great, there must be multiple.
Granville has 2 polling spots, 3 districts at the Village Hall, 2 districts out at the firehouse.
Who's gonna be in charge of, following guidelines regarding number of people in the building and airflow and leaving the doors open and 6-foot distance and lines out the door and flow one way through the building? Is the inspector's gonna be all in charge of all that at each polling place?
Basically, yes. The buildings will be set up with the 6-foot marking tapes on the floor. There'll be signs for people to follow them, for them to wear masks.
Cleaning
There are
supplies.
several that are in firehouses, I'm assuming that the fire department has nothing to do with this. The inspectors who are in that firehouse will be in charge of all the rules and regulations and guidelines to follow, and they'll be trained to be able to handle that.
Correct.
Okay,
Any other business? Sue?
Along the same guidelines, the fire departments are gonna do the New York tracing and that kind of, they would do that for the elections. What about the side polling sites? That, so the inspectors would do the New York tracing,
What do you mean by the New York tracing?
contract tracing, maybe?
Oh, you're gonna sign in, the elections inspectors have a record of who signs in, so if anything were to happen, we would use the voting logs.
Oh, yeah, the poll books can do photo history without a problem.
Yep. Nope.
Cool. Any other?
No, I didn't remember mine.
Keep up the good work. What we had was,
I just ran that, updated, we're at right around 3,200 absentees right now. Close to 3,200 requests.
that's a good number.
Yeah, it's gonna go higher.
There's nothing to do with Board of Elections.
Yeah, we're done with board elections, I believe. Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is sort of DPW and government out. We've had a meeting last week, or last month, I guess, with DPW regarding replacement of the Church Street Bridge, of which we acquired 2 properties on both sides of the bridge in order to have a staging area to put the bridge in. One of the properties is just basically a parking lot, which is perfect for them to put all their equipment and all their materials in. But it's also part of that same parcel is a small house. So when Deb, and on the other side is a building that's gonna be torn down. So Deb was gonna use the house for a construction trailer, so to speak. But when the project's done, it would be useful to the DPW to have that parking lot as access to the bridge for, if they need repairs or anything in the future. But the house would be worthless to them, which my consideration is to subdivide that property into 2, keep the parking lot, sell the house, that would generate some revenue for the county. Just throwing it out there for an idea, we'd have to go to the village and ask for, get a subdivision, subdivided, then as soon as they're done with the project, when they don't need it for a field office anymore, then sell that parcel. Just trying to generate something, because there's no reason, otherwise the county would have to keep the house, property maintenance, maintain the house, pay taxes on the house, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just throwing that out there, it's not gonna be done right now, I'm just saying, there's a process to this, and I don't wanna wait till the last minute to do it. Just a thought, Chris.
So I'm not opposed to that idea at first blush. I think if the committee thinks this is a good idea, a suggestion might be to refer it to Public Works with the recommendation that GovOps wants to go down this path, and then let's have, what I've not had a chance to do is had an operational discussion with Deb to make sure what all her concerns are for the current project and for the future. But I think if we could work that out with DPW, then I have no problem with it.
I did address those with her, and she was okay with it,
Okay.
but I would like to bring a map into like.
Yeah.
It's a very small house, it's not gonna bring a lot, but, 25 or 30,000 or 50,000 is better than nothing.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that.
Does the map and everything come to real property? Is that how we bring it to
That's what I
real
want,
maps?
should go through real property, or should go through, because
I'm just trying to figure out how we do it, the mechanism, and I think that's what Matt's trying to figure out.
My opinion, I think,
it's the county. Yeah.
what was that?
It'd be real property, wouldn't it? Because Deb's just using it for.
Right, it's county owned already.
Yeah, once the bridge is done, that's not gonna want anything to do with that.
Well, I think GovOps you guys could give it your conceptual stamp of approval if you want today. I think we should probably have a more in-depth discussion with the board at Public Works
Okay.
about the intricacies of what we're using it for, what we need for bridge maintenance in the future. Then if the DPW committee is comfortable with that solution, then I think we can just go for it.
Gonna be building and ground. I know we have to get a subdivider, it takes months sometimes to go through all the steps in the process.
Yeah, and like.
By next March, we can say, good, let's get this done.
And likely what I would say is that we would, the real property director would kind of spearhead the subdivision for us, and she would probably report back to GovOps on the status of that as we went through it.
Yeah, like you said, that subdivision could be all done when the bridge is done, and just buy, dismiss.
Oh, look at that.
That's got the map.
It's on top of that.
Man,
There we go.
Wow.
He's good.
So it's 41 Church Street, which you see right in front of you.
right in the middle.
You see the two cars that are parked, that's the parking lot where they'll stage of their equipment and their, supplies. The bridge is to your left. That little tiny house, which is, next to the parking lot, is the one that could be for sale. And you subdivide it right about where that light pole is behind the two cars.
Yep.
Waterfront property. That's waterfront, it's quite steep, but it goes right down to the river. So, and that is owned by the county. Across the road, you see that other building which will be torn down in order for them to do the bridge. And there'll be a small lot left there too.
So would we still own that lot on the other side of the road that we're tearing, under where we're tearing the bar down?
Well, I'm sure the village would love you to give it to them, or we could set up an MOU saying that the village could use it for access to the river, and we'll sign off, and the county can still own it, or whatever happens later on, that's fine. That's like 50 by 150 or something like that.
There's actually two lots on that side of the road,
Yeah.
so we keep both lots, or we sell one lot and keep the other?
Well, there's no sense selling lots on the other side of the road that both, even combined, are so small, with the zoning, it's unbuildable.
Can't build it.
Okay.
And it's still a place where you'd have to work on the bridge even from the other side.
Yeah, she'd wanna keep that to be able to access the bridge. So,
Okay.
that's the lot I'm talking about, and the question is, if that's okay with it, can we get the real property started down that road and make sure that at least we can get something out of it?
So,
Yeah, I wanna make sure that we're thinking far enough ahead that we're not gonna shoot ourselves in the foot 40 years from now for 20,000 or 30,000 in revenue now, but at least at face value, yeah, I don't see any problem with that.
Otherwise, you'd have to maintain that and fix
Yeah,
the
yeah.
windows and mow the lawn and, shovel the sidewalk.
Yep.
And try to avoid all those costs going forward. Just a thought. Okay, thank you.
so your suggestion is we move this to government ops with conceptual approval?
No, that's where we are right now. I thought we would go to DPW, yeah.
Okay. So, entertain a motion to move this to DPW with conceptual
I'll
approval.
make that motion.
Motion by, who's that, Paul?
Mr. Ferguson.
Do I have a second? Lester makes a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Done. Any other business? You still haven't remembered?
I still haven't remembered. I had some.
I haven't either, so.
Oh, you got Mrs. Bedler though.
Kathy?
I find that pretty good.
That was what I wanted to talk about. Thank you. So.
All right.
We mentioned it at finance, and then poor Mrs. Spezler called me in a bit of a panic right afterward regarding, the fee that we currently charge for data collection and assessing services to the local towns. I had mentioned that I just wanted to reserve the ability to change that rate in case our price went up considerably. I did have a chance to talk to Laura after that. The real property director is recommending that we keep the fee the same for 2021 that it is for 2020. She felt comfortable that we were covering our costs, there wasn't a cost to the county, and that it would be hard to do a very accurate cost extrapolation for a year because essentially we did nothing for 3 months. So Laura and I did have a chance to talk about it. Our recommendation is that we keep the fee the same for 2021 that it is for 2020.
Okay. To follow that up, the grant money supposedly is moving along now for the.
The grant money is moving. We have
Is it still subject to the 20% of the governor?
To the best of my knowledge, no. I have not looked at the new contract that came.
So you're thinking with the contract, that can't be, 20% can't be taken away?
No, not if it's not in the contract.
Okay. Because that was a big question I got.
But just remember that contract is separate than what we're talking
Yeah.
about for Mississippi.
Well, it was just on
Yeah,
the same
yeah.
lines that spurred that.
Yeah.
So because I had been asked the question if that would be, have 20% taken away, so it would be 20% more on each town. And if a contract, I don't think that's the case. Okay.
And to that point, the chairman and I got I think Al might have looked at the contract. He might be able to answer. I didn't have a chance to.
I just got it from Lori. I haven't looked at it yet, but I did want to follow up with this conversation when you're done.
Go for it before I move on.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that we're clear. Roger Wicks used to tell me all the time, words have meaning. Brian said that the shared services money is back on at the finance meeting. And I think that what he's talking about was we finally got the signed contract. We still don't know about the actual shared services money. So the towns that are participating in this program, I think they heard something different when he said that. So I just want to make sure that we're clear. What we know is the grant is in our hands. We still don't know about the actual shared services money piece.
Correct.
Right? Okay. Just so
Yeah,
that
and
we're-
I had a conversation with my colleagues about this last week or the week before. Nobody has seen any shared services money flowing recently. And I think all of my colleagues that I spoke to, nobody is submitting a shared services plan this year. We're all up to our elbows in alligators, and the fact that we haven't been paid for the last two, we're not real gung-ho about going through that exercise again. So we'll let our existing plan ride and then take another look at it next year.
Because I think the participating towns in the revals, that revenue coming in was how they were going to fund their share of it. So I think they're watching that very closely.
Yeah, my question was, what's the percentage on that shared services? Refresh me.
Okay, so what we did was we structured the shared services plan with that grant to basically cover all the costs of the town. It remains to be seen whether that money will be coming or not.
Right.
Things are starting to look better than they were 4 or 5 months ago. So what I was going to say, so this dovetails nicely, is the chairman and I got a report from the comptroller on Friday from our regional rep, and the numbers for the state are much better than what he has been publicly forecasting. So he's up about $1 billion over budget or over forecast on revenue. So he's under budget, but he's $1 billion higher in revenue than he said he was going to be. His overall cash position at the end of August is about $5 billion better than he was this time last year. $4 billion of that is because he did some short-term borrowing. So if you net that out, he's still $1 billion ahead of where he was last year. Personal income tax receipts are up, his expenses are down, so his general fund is looking better than all the financial projections he gave us. And I think that's why over the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've been saying things like, all of a sudden the assessing contract came through. We started getting DSS settlements. We got told by OCFS that we're ultimately gonna get the 20% of the reduced state funding back. He's starting to let money go because he finally has cash. So I do think the money for our plans that are already submitted will flow. It's just a question of when.
I just trying to figure out,
Yeah.
if we had the budget, all of a sudden there's a difference here that was on.
As of now, no. I wouldn't yet. I think that I have a lot of experience with this because I have a toddler right now. It's about managing expectations, right? I think the governor threw out really bad scenarios to get us all thinking that the sky was falling. And then when he comes back and says, I'm only going to cut you 5%, we say, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. So I don't think it's going to be as bad as we were afraid 6 months ago.
Okay, so with all that being said and the questions he's asked, here's what we need to know. Are we back moving forward? Because it was like cease and desist on going forward.
Yeah, we're back moving forward.
We're back moving forward?
Yep.
Okay. I kind of wanted to know where that was at when people asked.
Yep, full steam ahead.
Very good. Al?
I just checked the contract that Laura forwarded me, and the contract is reflecting 590,031, so.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
I believe that's 100%.
Yeah, it is, because I think the whole contract with the vendor is like $670.
That sounds right.
So yes, that would be 100%.
Good. Okay. Anything else? And just so people don't think we forgot it, Real Property Services is not here, so we'll do her budget at another time. Okay, was there anything else for finance? I will adjourn, motion to adjourn, government ops. And finance is adjourned.
You don't need a motion, use the power of the chairmanship.
Okay. I don't have the hammer though. But Paul did make the motion. Paul made the motion.